Welcome to NFL Live. There you see him, Aaron Rodgers, still a free agent. Of course, the Steelers, one of the teams who could potentially land the 40-year-old quarterback, Cam Hayward, was asked if he would go on a darkness retreat to try and recruit Rodgers to Pittsburgh. The Steelers' defensive tackle's answer didn't disappoint.
I ain't doing that darkness retreat. I don't need any of that crap. Like, either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. If you want me to recruit, that's the recruiting pitch. Pittsburgh Steelers, if you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin on my back. If we don't sign a cornerback, you go in the year with Mason. I think we feel good about it, but, excited to have him back. He really, he's a guy for the locker room, and a lot of guys vibe with him. I want to play football. I'm tired of talking about the quarterback situation. I'd rather have it done. I'm ready to move on in the free agency.
For a second, I thought Mason Rudolph had joined that podcast. As we welcome you to NFL Live, Phil Yates is here, Adam Schefter, Mel Kiper Jr. We got a lot to get to, you guys. A new mock draft that we're going to dig into a little bit later. But let's start with what we just heard from Cam Hayward, because we can't ignore that. Adam, what more can you tell us? The latest on Rodgers and Pittsburgh as a possible landing spot.
Well, Pittsburgh remains interested in Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is slow playing things and taking his time coming to some type of decision. A lot of people out there believe that Aaron Rodgers ideally would like to land with the Minnesota Vikings, who aren't thinking in that way right now. That doesn't mean they couldn't come around to it at some point in time, but they're not there right now at this point in time. And so Pittsburgh has remained in a holding pattern in regards to Aaron Rodgers, and we'll wait to see whether or not he comes around and winds up landing in Pittsburgh. And I think right now everybody's waiting on Aaron Rodgers. You have the Steelers waiting on Aaron Rodgers, the Giants waiting on Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson waiting on Aaron Rodgers, a lot of people waiting on Aaron Rodgers, who doesn't appear to be in any great rush to make his decision.
All right, so Adam Schefter has a great podcast. You should all listen to it. It's the aptly named Adam Schefter podcast. And this morning, a new episode dropped. And the title was Following in Favre's Footsteps. And, of course, it dove into, along with Ty Schmidt, the possibility of Aaron Rodgers possibly playing with the Vikings. As Schefter just said, that right now it doesn't seem like it is likely. Until Aaron Rodgers has the door slammed shut in his face by the Minnesota Vikings that they are not going to sign him, if I'm him, I'm biding my time as well. What is Pittsburgh going to do? Who else are they going to go out there and sign? Are they going to bring Russell Wilson back? Maybe. I don't think they feel as though the ceiling is high enough, though, with Russell Wilson. So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, understanding that Pittsburgh is probably an option if I wait a little bit longer, I'm going to at least make the Minnesota Vikings tell me definitively no. Because while I might have some apprehension if I'm the Vikings about signing Aaron Rodgers, unquestionably, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, the place that gives me the best chance to win big in 2025 is Minnesota. So while I'd love it for the news cycle if we had some clarity, Laura, I don't blame Rodgers, even if there's a remote possibility of Minnesota eventually bubbling up.
Just feels so deja vu a couple years ago. All right, Mel, let's say the Steelers don't go and get Aaron Rodgers. Is it possible they find their quarterback in April's draft?
You know, is Shedeur Sanders going to fall to the Steelers? Is Jackson Dart going to fall to the Steelers? Maybe. I don't think so based on what I'm hearing. But, hey, you never know. And then Tyler Shuck from Louisville, will he be there? I think he will definitely be there. Will they take him there? I think that would be a stretch. Then you get into no second-round pick. That went to Seattle for DK Metcalf. So all of a sudden you're thinking third round was Jalen Milroe from Alabama or Will Howard from Ohio State or Kyle McCord from Syracuse going to be interesting at that point, or Dylan Gabriel, Oregon. So they're going to be, I think, third, fourth-round options, Laura, not having that two. Will Tyler Shuck be there in the second round? He could, but like I said, they don't have that choice. So they go first round to third round, okay? So that's going to be where it's going to be tricky to see what direction they want to go, because like I say, right now, I don't think Shedeur or Jackson Dart will be there when they pick, unless they want to try to move up. If Dart slides a bit, we'll see how that all plays out.
They could be scrambling if this doesn't get solved before then. And again, the Russell Wilson of it all, he visited the Browns, the Giants. We'll see where he ends up landing. But let's get into some top stories. And for a little bit more on that, we go back to Adam Schefter. We go to the other Pennsylvania team, a bittersweet day in Philadelphia. Adam, what more can you tell us?
Laura, the longest tenured Eagle in franchise history, Brandon Graham, who played 15 years for the Philadelphia Eagles, announced his retirement from the NFL today. His final NFL game will have been the Eagles' Super Bowl victory over the Kansas City Chiefs, in which he came back from his torn triceps injury to play 15 quality years in Philadelphia, somebody immensely popular in and out of the locker room. Azeez Ojulari, the former Giants pass rusher, followed the same free agent path that Saquon Barkley did, from New Jersey to Philadelphia, to go from the Giants to the Eagles, landing a 1-year, $4 million deal. The Eagles bring an added pass rush, and they're hoping they get the same kind of production that they did from another Giants free agent last year. And the Eagles also extended their All-Pro right tackle Lane Johnson by 1 year through the 2020 season, guaranteed him more money, but tie him down long term, just as they did with Saquon Barkley, giving him more money, and brought back Zach Bond. And so while the Eagles have made a number of moves like Azeez Ojulari, they've also invested in their own, making sure that their most productive, important players are taken care of now and for the long-term future.
Howie Roseman's so good at that. And we heard, Adam, you reporting on Brandon Graham's retirement. The two-time Super Bowl champ spoke to the media this afternoon. Listen to this.
First, I just want to say, 15 years ago, I walked into this city as a young man with dreams, big dreams, a little bit of nervousness, and a whole lot of fire in my heart. I had no idea back then what this journey would bring. I didn't know how many times I would be tested. I didn't know how much I would grow. And I surely didn't know how deeply I would fall in love with these fans and the team in this city.
Ooh, you see how much it means to him, how much he means to Philadelphia fans as well. The Eagles have lost a few key pieces from their Super Bowl winning defense this offseason. Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Isaiah Rodgers all signed deals with new teams. Plus, they traded safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Texans in exchange for guard Kenyon Green and a fifth-round pick. Philly's been relatively quiet so far, but they did sign former Giants pass rusher Azeez Ojulari, as you just heard from Adam, and cornerback Adoree Jackson. Mel, none of this is a big surprise, but where do you have them looking in the first round?
They always preferred the trenches. Now, last year they went to the cornerback spot with Quinion Mitchell, then Cooper DeJean, which was a great second-round pick for them, and were key elements in their run to the Super Bowl and their win there. But Milton Williams lost. I thought about Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. That's who I gave them in the mock 3.0. Walter Nolan, Ole Miss, formerly of Texas A&M, one of the top players coming out of high school. You think about Milton Williams, how critical he was to that defense because he was disruptive. And Walter Nolan is quick, explosive, athletic, and very disruptive, and you can move him around. So I thought with Milton Williams moving on in free agency, Walter Nolan had picked 32 field out of Ole Miss. They love those Georgia players. Go to Ole Miss in the SEC and get a Walter Nolan at the end of the first round.
Yeah, Ojulari, by the way, a Georgia alum himself. One thing about Philadelphia that we know, Laura, at Males, they are never going to be caught flat-footed. That's kind of the brilliance of this roster construction, is that they kind of forecast the players that are going to depart before they have actually departed. So you think back to last year's draft. They used a third-round pick on Jalix Hunt, this small school product who began his college career as a safety at Cornell. He ends up being drafted in the third round and has a sack in the Super Bowl on Patrick Mahomes. The Eagles have always found a way to bring terrific depth to the forefront when they needed it, but not necessarily in a way in which, hey, they're drafting for need every single year. So between the continued breakout and ascension of Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, David Ajabo, and then these free agent signings they have made, who, by the way, Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche for like a maximum amount of like $7 million. We'll see whether those guys work out. But there's just low-risk investments by the Philadelphia Eagles front office that they have enough reward that it's worth doing so. That being said, with Philadelphia, even with that good plan in place for right now, they take another pass rusher at 32. Won't surprise me one bit because that is the Eagles' way.
Well, Phil, I think they're going to have a lot of options because we've seen them this offseason pay Saquon Barkley and Lane Johnson and Zach Bond. But it's also worth pointing out that with the free agents that they lost, like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, they are now expected to have 4 compensatory draft picks next year. And over the next 2 drafts, that will give them 20 draft picks, 20 in the next 2 drafts. And they are armed to reload with some good talent. And if you take a look at this team's drafting record in recent years, nobody's been any more successful in the first couple of rounds of the draft than the Philadelphia Eagles. There are their additional picks in the 2026 draft. They're armed to bear in this upcoming draft, and they do have some needs and some holes that they'd like to plug. But they're going to have ample opportunity to do this with all this added draft capital, which also probably will give them added flexibility if they want to come up in the draft, that they really like a player and they want to go get him, or go back in the draft as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, too. I mean, those players that they could get with the picks they've got in the early rounds, too, those are consequential rounds where you're really going to make your team or break your team. But in their case, make your team. All right, new on NFL Live. Some news out of New England, Adam. What do we need to know?
All right, Laura, yesterday the Minnesota Vikings released their former first-round draft pick, Garrett Bradbury, the center. He's now reached agreement on a 2-year deal worth up to $12 million with the New England Patriots. So the Patriots taking steps to fortify their offensive line after they released David Andrews earlier this offseason. Their veteran team captain moved on from him, but Garrett Bradbury now is going to step in, and he looks like he is in line to become the new starting center for Drake May and the New England Patriots.
Yeah, Laura, this team really needs some stability in the middle of the offensive line. Now, they did make a signing of Morgan Moses last week during free agency. They feel like they have the right side of the offensive line now accounted for between Moses and Mike Onwenu. Regardless of the fact that the Patriots have some serious holes amongst their wide receiver room, they have to find a way to also keep Drake May protected. He's a very mobile quarterback, but last year he was under duress far too much. Huge part of the equation that is still missing in New England, left tackle. That being said, you can't get all your moves done in just one day. So New England now has a man in the middle of the offense under new offensive line coach, Doug Marrone, who's been around forever in the NFL, knows offensive line play as well as anybody, to help give Drake May a little bit more stability.
All right, so O-line, left tackle specifically, wide receiver, that's what we're looking out for the Patriots in the draft. We'll see if they can get it done there.
Maybe a mock draft could give us some insight on
that, right? That's a good teaser. And we're just getting started on NFL.
Way to bring back Trey Hendrickson, and the deeper it gets into the offseason, it certainly seems like some of those options for Trey Hendrickson to be traded to would be more limited. A team like the Washington Commanders might have been interested at one point in time, but it added to its defensive line. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers go out and sign Hassan Reddick. The Buffalo Bills go out and get Joey Bosa. The Atlanta Falcons go out and get Leonard Floyd. And again, Trey Hendrickson is in his own category, lead pass rusher who led the NFL in sacks. But the Bengals granted him permission to seek a trade, and so far, a trade hasn't materialized. And it hasn't materialized in part because any trade partner would have to, number one, satisfy Trey Hendrickson with a contract, and then satisfy the Cincinnati Bengals with compensation in return. Hard to find a team that can get both done. And as long as that's the case, there remains the possibility that Cincinnati will continue, as it has been, talking to Trey Hendrickson to see if there's a way to figure out a way to bring him back to Cincinnati on a long-term deal.
All right, I told you that we would hear from Higgins and Chase when they spoke to the media. Now we do have that sound, so let's go there for a moment and then we'll talk about it.
We didn't really set up a plan until after the season, and then the plan it didn't always go to plan, so, it's always bumps in the road. I feel like, we handled the situation the best way we could.
I never had any doubt that, Rocky was going to get it done, and, I never had any doubt that, Katie was going to, finally, say, we want you here. And just glad it happened, and, I'm happy to be here.
All right, we love it. Congratulations to those guys. Let's focus in a little bit more on the needs for the Bengals, trying to shore up that defense, Mel, which is obviously a gaping hole in a lot of ways. But with Cincinnati grabbing Shamar Stewart with their first-round pick, was that a move that you did in your mock to pair with Trey Hendrickson, or in case they need to replace him in your mind?
Yeah, I kind of thought about both. I said if Hendrickson moves, even if with Hendrickson is raised back, you got to need somebody opposite him. And let's have Jamar and Shamar. Maybe if Shamar can do what Jamar does, would be in good shape here. But I think when you look at this kid, and Field knows who he is. He's an LTPer. He looks the part. And I'll tell you, if you could draw up a great prospect at defensive end, 6'5", nearly 270 pounds with 4.59 speed, about potential, physically, athletically gifted, he's got to transform all that talent into sacks. Now, Hey, Danielle Hunter did it. Wasn't a sack artist at LSU. He's got 99 career sacks. Away at Baltimore. No sacks his final year. 10 this past season, right? So we've had that happen to guys in the National Football League where the light's gone on. They've been coached up. They get a repertoire of moves, and all of a sudden, they're off to the races. So let's hope Shamar Stewart can improve on that 1.5 sacks and get it up to maybe 10, 12, which his talent indicates he should be able to do.
Yeah, Laura, I think the way the Bengals approach pick 17 will be pretty instructive because on the one hand, when you have these three players and Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins signed for the next 5 seasons, you got a long runway, right? I mean, those are 3 elite players that alone give you a pretty darn good foundation for an offense. Joe Burrow famously said, our window is as long as my entire career is, and there's some merit to that. So if you draft a guy like Shamar Stewart who might need some time, you've got time because those guys are there. On the other hand, when you come off this season that you finished 9-8 and it felt bitterly disappointing, you might also be looking for a player who is ready to roll right away. And both Mel and I agree, Shamar Stewart is not the guy that we're expecting to immediately blossom into this high-impact player. So there are other pass rushers like Mike Green from Marshall, who led the FBS with 17 sacks last year. Mykel Williams from Georgia, who had 14 career sacks, which doesn't sound like much, but it's a whole lot more than 4.5, which is where Shamar Stewart was at. And then really anything on defense is fine for me early because it's not just the pass rush that needs to be better for Cincinnati. If you address any of their 3 levels on defense with pick number 17 and eventually find some more interior offensive line depth during the draft, I'll consider it a win for this team, whether it's a Jahad Campbell, stand-up linebacker from Alabama, either of the safeties that might go in the first round, Malachi Starks from Nick Emanwari, or any of the corners that might go in the first round as well. Jahdae Barron, maybe a Max Hairston at 17. I'm good with that. As long as that player can play defense, Cincinnati's draft on night 1 will be successful to me because we know they're going to be able to put up 30, 35 points a game. Right. They also might just give up 40 or 45 points in a game. And by the way, not just against elite offenses. Like Russell Wilson and the Steelers carved them up in their last good offensive performance of the season. That's how bad that Cincinnati defense was.
Yeah, the Bengals allowed 35 points 5 times last season. Their most in a season since 1991. Every single one of those defensive guys that you named, though, didn't feel like 17 would be too high for them at all. So I agree, Phil. There's a lot of talent there that they can grab to get better in the first round. All right, still ahead. It's mock time. Mel Kiper, Mock Draft 3.0 is out. We're diving in today. There's so much to dive into here, but with the man himself, Mel Kiper Jr. Let's start here. Mel, take us through your top 3 picks. Let's start with the Titans at 1.
Laura handpicked for Brian Callahan, his quarterback. Inherited quarterbacks, less patience with those guys like Will Levis. Your guy, though, you'll be more patient with. And this is the gunslinger. All the arm angles, the arm strength, the mobility, 17 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years for Cam Ward. So Washington State out in Pullman in weather conditions that aren't favorable all the time. And then certainly this past year at Miami. Abdul Carter, I'm trying everything at Cleveland, Laura. I'm going for the pass rusher here. Pass rusher opposite Garrett because the wide 9, you got 2 guys now that can attack off the edge. 6 tackles lost to 24, 4.5 sacks to 12 sacks. And the Giants, I'm going to go here for another hand picked by Brian Daboll. Get Brian in tight. Talk about the father, Archie, to Dion with Shador. The fact that the big lights, the big stage, he can handle. Pocket. He's going to do it old school. He's going to do it the traditional way. But you got to protect them up front. Said the same thing about Tom Brady when he came out. You give him protection, give him a solid offensive line in front of him, he will pick the defense apart.
Oh, I love it, Mel. All right, one big reason. Let's zero in on the Titans a little bit, okay? We've got Mel, of course, having them take Cam Ward with the first overall pick. And one big reason for that would be Will Levis, okay? He came into the league, and since he's come in, he's had the worst total QBR, has been sacked at the highest rate in the NFL. He also has the second worst completion percentage and has more turnovers than offensive touchdowns. So, Phil, the Titans haven't been so lucky when it's come to drafting quarterbacks in the past few years. What makes you think that Cam Ward could turn that around?
Yeah, this is a much more finished product, is Cam Ward, than Will Levis when he came out. Yes, Cam Ward played those 2 seasons, an incarnate word that Mel referenced. But if you look at his 5-year snapshot, including 3 in a big-time college football program, he had 2,328 passing attempts. The reason why it says 1,483 there, it doesn't include those 2 years of incarnate word. 738 for Will Levis, 618 from Malik Willis while he played at Liberty. This is a player that you should know what you're getting from Cam Ward by the time he arrives at the NFL. We talked about this yesterday on NFL Live, that despite the fact that you have a really good snapshot of what Cam Ward is already, I also think there's even more layers to the player, specifically as an athlete in space. He never really need to lean on his legs because of the fact that he was throwing for video game numbers basically in every season of his college career. But in an NFL where we are seeing more and more quarterbacks impact games with their legs, I think Cam Ward very much has that within his skill set. While he is 6th overall on my big board, or 7th overall, on my big board, I still think, Mel, he is a justifiable #1 overall player in this year's draft class.
It was nice of them to go out and get a couple offensive linemen they didn't have for Will Levis. That's why he played with a shoulder injury much of the season. He played through that. He showed he toughed it out, and he had a five-game stretch with 7 touchdowns and 2 picks, and he played 4 of those teams were playoff teams, 78% against the Chargers, 75% against Houston, and an upset. So I'm not ready to give up on Will Levis. I don't know if they are or not. But for Cam Ward, now he's getting hopefully some more help than what Levis got. That's why Levis got hurt. They couldn't protect him. Right tackle was a turnstile. It was a disaster, okay? They're behind the sticks. Plays were called back. It was a nightmare. Receivers dropping catchable balls at critical moments. That's why you don't sustain drives. Bad offensive line play leads to quarterbacks like back empowered. Receivers got to get better. Guess what? First 2 games of the year, don't want to have punts blocked, okay? So improve special teams as well. So a lot that has to go on for this Tennessee team to get better and for Cam Ward to have a fighting chance to succeed.
Mel, you mentioned right tackle being a turnstile. Well, they signed Dan Moore to play left tackle, which moves their first-round draft pick last year, J.C. Latham, over to right tackle. So with one free agent acquisition, the Titans feel like they've solidified 2 spots along their offensive line, and that'll be beneficial to whoever plays quarterback. And clearly it looks like there are signs pointing to Cam Ward going #1 to the Tennessee Titans. The only quarterback that the Titans signed during free agency was Brandon Allen. They put more emphasis on upgrading the offensive line, as we talked about. Now, there still could be, and I would imagine there will be, aggressive attempts from other teams like the New York Giants to see if they can trade up to #1. But the Titans hold all the cards. They get to determine how much they value Cam Ward and whether or not there's an offer out there that would be worthy of even entertaining to get them to move off the #1 pick here in the coming weeks.
Adam, any sense of what the offer would have to be to get them to entertain it? You're so right. I mean, they hold all the cards here. What would really entice them?
Well, I think it would have to be significant, and even then, it really doesn't even matter if they've made the decision that they like Cam Ward enough not to move him. And that really is the key here, Laura, because if they have fallen for Cam Ward and they're convinced that Cam Ward is the quarterback of the future, it doesn't matter what the Browns or Giants or any other team is willing to offer. The Titans aren't going to move off that spot. That's the biggest decision that they can make. If they like Cam Ward that much, I don't care what the offers are. It's going to be very hard to dislodge that pick.
And as you guys have said, the tea leaves are pointing to them setting everything up better than they did for Will Levis. Mel, to your point, I knew we would get you angry there talking about Will Levis, and you have a very valid point. I agree. Setting it up better for whoever they're going to draft. One of these rookies, and it sounds like Cam Ward. But back here on NFL Live, it's mock day. Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft 3.0 is out. Here's the full mock. So many things to key in on. We got Abdul Carter highlighted there. He's going second to the Browns. And I wanted to zero in on this. I really like this by Mel. Carter would likely be the best available player in that spot, of course. The Browns clearly have some questions at quarterback, too. Cleveland signed Deshaun Watson looking for a solution. They just got more problems, as we all know. And since they traded for him in 2022, their QB room has the worst touchdown to interception ratio and completion percentage. They also rank bottom 4 in yards per attempt and total QBR. So, Mel, a lot of talk about the Browns picking a quarterback with this pick at 2, but why do you have them drafting Carter?
I've tried everything with the Browns, Laura. One of these weird leaks, I'll get it right. Maybe in the mock 4.0, the 10 days before the draft, I'll give Shedeur Sanders to the Browns and Eddie. I can't go wrong. One of these daggone mocks will have the Browns right. But for Abdul Carter is a great pass rusher. So is Myles Garrett. It's nice to have 2 of them and in a conference with great quarterbacks. So I felt like, okay, in this defense, they haven't had that opposite card for the money. Cleveland with Shedeur Sanders in that division. Keep in mind, arm strength's not his forte. So you got Cleveland weather, Baltimore weather, Pittsburgh weather, Cincinnati weather. You can say the same thing about the Giants with Shedeur as well. But for Cleveland, that's what I thought. Maybe they would go pass rusher here and maybe look at one of those other quarterbacks down the line, because there's about 4 or 5 quarterbacks in that next tier all bunched together.
Mel, it is difficult to figure out exactly what the Browns are going to do, but I can tell you this. I think the Browns general manager, Andrew Berry, has spent an inordinate amount of time talking to, meeting with, going over Shedeur Sanders and figuring out whether or not he's worthy of the number 2 overall selection in this particular draft. We'll see if the Browns decide to go. Certainly have put in a lot of time on Shedeur Sanders, the other player, and I think fond of Travis Hunter. And there are a lot of ways that they could play him, and there are a lot of uses that he could have for the Browns' defense and offense. Laura, you want to validate that?
Yeah,
Do they not like Travis Hunter or what?
That is 100% true. I mean, listen, a lot of teams like Travis Hunter, as you know, Adam, but when the Browns have talked about Travis Hunter, they've also said that they would let him play offense and defense, which Travis Hunter would tell you is very important to him as well. Let's live there for a second, Mel. You've drafted, as you said, in all 3 of your mocks, you've put different players with Cleveland trying to figure out what they may do. What about Travis Hunter, and how would that work potentially for Cleveland?
It'd be a great pick. And I think when I moved Cam Ward, because everybody said back in the day, and Adam knows this, when I started this, well, Cleveland's taking a quarterback at 2. So I said, okay, Cam Ward goes 2 to Cleveland. And maybe Carter goes 1. Because remember, Tennessee had said at that point they wanted a generational talent, right? Neither one of these quarterbacks, in my opinion, are generational talents. They said they wanted to stockpile draft picks. Thought maybe moving down would be in the cards, right? So I thought, okay, if you keep the pick, you take the pass rusher, which Tennessee desperately needs, right? So that's why Cam Ward was a 2. Then you hear, well, Cam Ward could go to Tennessee. That opens up Cleveland again. So that's that shifting of why 3 different players end up with the Cleveland Browns. And probably the guy they take, I don't even have, which may be, as Adam said, Shedeur Sanders, who I would take, but I don't know if they will. So this is going to be fun to watch. You love the questioning of each pick, because we don't know. Cam Ward, Adam says, looks like that could be the pick. But at 2 and 3, when you got a Travis Hunter, who is a generational talent, by the way, because these guys don't come along very often. He is a special entity. Any team would love to have Travis Hunter.
Yeah, Mel. So I feel like we may have a little teaser for who Mel's going to put to the Browns in his mock 4.0. It very well may be Shedeur Sanders. We'll see. All right, so after you have the Browns picking Abdul Carter at number 2, Mel's got the Giants grabbing Shedeur Sanders off the board at 3, which, of course, you can make a big case for that as well. But I like this pick, too. Nobody has thrown less touchdown passes than the Giants over the last 5 seasons. There's 74 passing touchdowns, the fewest in a 5-season span since the Browns and Rams both had less from 2008 to 2012. The Giants have now gone 5 straight seasons without throwing 20 touchdown passes. They had only done that 5 times total from 2000 to 2019. My goodness, it's just kind of some gross stats there. Mel, so many different grades out there on Shedeur Sanders, but what makes him the best fit for the Giants?
You said it, Laura. There's so many grades out there, and I have NFL people tell me, no. He's a late first rounder. He's not. He's getting pushed up because he's Shedeur Sanders. Well, I heard the same thing about Peyton Manning. If his name was Peyton Jones, it'd be a third-round pick. I've said that 100 times. So I'm a Shedeur Sanders guy. I have been all the way through this film. If anybody disagrees with that, I think it's a phenomenal fit. He's used to this stage. The Giants went Eli Manning. Look how that worked out. Shedeur Sanders is that type of quarterback as well. I think he's underrated with his legs. He can roll left and right and throw accurate strikes, and he can get a first down on 3rd and 7. So to me, Shedeur Sanders, he's already dealt with NFL conditions in that pocket where he's been hit time and time again, yet somehow he managed to survive, and somehow he managed to complete 74% of his passes this year, and somehow he managed to never complete less than 60% in any game. That's pretty amazing considering the pressure he was under from defensive lines who they couldn't block 2 years ago. They got a little bit better this year. So I would love the pick if it's the Giants with Shedeur Sanders, but I'm a little worried now with all this talk about Cleveland taking Shedeur that maybe the Giants won't see him there. But if he is there and they passed on him, I will say this. If he's there and the Giants passed on Shedeur Sanders, I would be really surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think his toughness gets enough credit. I'm glad that you pointed that out for sure about Shedeur. Adam, there's been lots of talk, though, news on New York hosting free agent quarterbacks over the past days. What have you been hearing about their plans at quarterback?
I think their plans right now are wide open. They're waiting for an answer from Aaron Rodgers. They have been in touch with Russell Wilson. They're hosting Jameis Winston on a visit today. I think there's some interest in Joe Flacco, who visited last week. And this is all prior to the draft. And if we go back to the draft last year, Laura, the Giants desperately tried to trade up to the 3rd overall selection to see if they could get a shot at Drake May. Well, lo and behold, where are the Giants this year? In the 3rd overall selection that they desperately tried to trade up to last year when they couldn't get the quarterback last year. Now, there's a realistic chance they're going to have the possibility to pick a player like Shedeur Sanders, and they've spent a lot of time around Shedeur Sanders as well. And somewhere along the way, I would expect they're going to add a veteran quarterback. It would not be surprising if they wound up using a high pick on a quarterback. This is a team that's in a division with Jalen Hurts, with Jaden Daniels, with Dak Prescott, and right now, the only quarterback on its roster is Tommy DeVito. They've got to do something to dramatically upgrade that position, and we're going to see them make moves here in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it feels like it could be beneficial to them to draft a rookie, but also have a veteran QB there. It just seems like something that could help on all fronts with knowing how important it is for them. Their jobs on the line. All right, let's talk about another team that could also be in the market for a quarterback in the draft. The Saints aren't known for taking first-round quarterbacks. The last time they took one in the first round was in 1971 when they picked Archie Manning 2nd overall. That's the longest active drought in the NFL without selecting a first-round quarterback. Pretty interesting. The top quarterback in this year's class, Cam Ward, was asked about playing in New Orleans.
So it's a great meeting, especially, if you get a chance to go play with a Super Bowl coach like Coach Moore. He knows how to dial up the playbook. But I just think the biggest thing that I took away from that meeting is that you just got to be prepared at all times, whether you go in as a starter or you go in as a backup. You never know when your number's going to be called. But it was a great meeting with them. The Saints, they were one of my favorite teams growing up when I was little. I love watching Drew Brees and Colston out there. So, it'll be a dream of mine to play for them.
All right, so, by the way, that was from a recent charity event, if you're wondering why Cam Ward was talking about the Saints. Chances are pretty low that Ward would be there at 9, but, Mel, you agree they do need a quarterback to get with their first pick there in the draft. You've got Jackson Dart to New Orleans. This is pretty interesting. Rising up the board there for Jackson Dart, Mel. Why?
Yeah, a couple of things, Laura. First of all, the talent. It's in abundance. I mean, he's 6'2", 220-plus pounds. He can make all the throws. And I'll tell you what, his legs, he can run. He's tough, aggressive, athletic, and fast. Also, the improvement. Completion percentage kept going up and up. 62 to 65 to 69% this past year. Touchdowns from 20 to 23 to 29. 11 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years. 5th pair. 2 Ole Miss quarterbacks, Archie Manning and Jackson Dart, end up with the Saints. So I think if Kellen Moore loves Jackson Dart, you got to take him. I know Field had mentioned trading down. I'm not going to lose my quarterback, maybe a couple spots, but be careful because there's the Rams sitting out there who I thought about Jackson Dart for in the 20s, but I gave him at 9 to the New Orleans Saints. I think if Kellen Moore loves him, new coach, get your quarterback. Jackson Dart is, I think, a little underrated, undervalued in this process because people are thinking it's just 2 guys and Dart's with the other guys. I think there's the second tier with just Dart standing alone as QB3.
Ooh.
Yeah, Laura, I had to stay off the internet for 24 hours after my last mock draft went out when I had Jackson Dart going 21st overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I understand where Mel is coming from. By the way, we'll explain to Mel what the internet is after the show. But I would
Mel,
not feel comfortable if it were me making the pick, number 9 overall with a player in Jackson Dart, who is going to be just outside my top 40 when my top 50 drops a little bit later on this month. But at the same time, if you're the New Orleans Saints, what other options do you have at quarterback? Derek Carr is your quarterback for this year. He is not the answer long term, and we have seen that with Derek Carr, the ceiling on this team is very mediocre, right? They just have not won meaningfully with Derek Carr under center. So at some point, you have to use this incredibly valuable resource that you have, the 9th overall pick, on a player that you believe gives you a chance to give you an extended runway to win. I'm not totally there on Jackson Dart, but he plays the most important position in all of sports, Laura.
I do think that connection potentially with Kellen Moore, and then knowing, too, you're a first-year